Hey everyone. Today I want to go through Bernie Sanders' Twitter feed. Recently, whenever I'm on Twitter, I'll see a lot of activity on his tweets, and I usually want to respond to them. And Twitter is a terrible platform for responding to, let's say, the complex issues that come up in politics. And I know it's a little unfair, let's say, to respond to a tweet with its 240 characters or whatnot with, let's say, verbal response like in this video. But there's a lot to unpack, and I think it's still a valuable exercise. Before we get into it, in each episode, I'd like to begin responding to comments from previous episodes. So if you have a question, a comment, a critique, or information that you'd like to add to the content, leave a comment below and leave the hashtag read my comment. That way I know that you are okay with your comment and your handle, I suppose, being up on a video. It's just one of those things where I would prefer to have consent from someone before I use any of their words, and it's most efficient for me if I have that up front. Okay, well, let's begin. So I chose Bernie Sanders for this because he is looks like he's the front runner for the Democrat Party nomination to run for president. Also, he is perhaps the most ideologically different than I am, or from the views that I hold. And also, being the front runner is that he's getting popular, and so his ideas are popular, and since I see them as potentially damaging, well, not potentially, let's say certainly damaging, I would like the opportunity to put out into the internet, my counter narrative and give people the opportunity to hear the other side of the issue for the various policies that Bernie Sanders and other people put out there. I think this might be the first in a series. We'll see how it goes. If anybody likes it, if I like the format. But enough beating around the bush. Let's get to it. So here's his Twitter page, and we're just going to scroll down. I haven't looked over these, so I don't know if this is going to be good or not. Okay, so we got a message for Nevada voters. Real change is never just a president signing a bill. It is millions of people standing up for justice. Yeah, that's true, and more than just a feel-good movement sort of context. It also requires, the Congress to pass a bill and hand it over to the president for signing, which is an interesting part of a potential Bernie Sanders presidency, is that I think he would be fought the entire way, and he probably wouldn't get any of the bills that he would want, as long as the Republicans have one of the houses. And I don't know how the Democrat Party as a whole would be on board for all of his various spending bills. And so this is actually pretty similar. That idea is pretty similar to when Ron Paul was running, and I supported him as a candidate, or when he was a candidate, but kind of the same thing happens for him too. Like, if he actually got into the presidency, he wouldn't have cooperation from any of the other branches of government, and virtually, nothing would be done. Bernie Sanders, though, I think he would definitely flex the power of the presidency to do as much as he can outside of the Congress. And I believe he's actually tweeted about that. His desire to circumvent Congress should they not cooperate and send him policies and bills that he wants, which sounds a bit authoritarian to me. But let's move on. Let's see. Okay, so he's insulting Trump for being all of the various adjectives, which I don't disagree with, but it's getting kind of old now. You can attack him for his terrible policies. Oh, and as just an aside, I am not a Trump supporter. I think he is a world-class authoritarian. I don't think there should be a presidency at all. So this is not a exercise in bashing Bernie Sanders in order to support Trump or anyone else. This is just meant for responding to the ideas that Bernie Sanders puts out there. Let's see. Trump says the economy is doing great. If you're a billionaire, he's right. It's not doing so well if you're one of the millions of working people living paycheck to paycheck. So this, I think, highlights pretty well the kernel of truth that is in a lot of what Bernie Sanders says, which makes it more palatable for people and makes it appear like it's the complete truth. The economy is not doing well, and for those of us that track the Federal Reserve and its role in the economy, the Federal Reserve is acting like the economy is in a recession, and it's taking activities to prop up the stock market and the economy as a whole by pumping liquidity into banks and Wall Street and keeping the interest rates low. So he's definitely correct here. The economy is not doing well. While the stock market is going up and everybody's excited about all the profits and gains in their stocks, it's unsustainable, and it's probably going to fail the same way things did in 2008 when the bubbles start bursting. It is pretty scary too. I see articles every once in a while about how the average American has, I think it's like less than $1,000 in savings and couldn't handle an emergency that would drive them into debt, which is a legitimate worry, and it's a legitimate, let's say, flaw in the economy to where people are influenced to not save and to where they don't have enough money to save. I will agree also that giving money to billionaires and the companies they run is absolutely immoral. Banks should not be bailed out. Corporations should not be given money. They shouldn't be given special protections. One caveat, though, one kind of detail that Bernie Sanders misses a lot of the time is that if he views a decrease in taxation on the banks or I guess or business in general, or profits, let's say corporate profits, he views that as a subsidy, and so he speaks dishonestly in this aspect, because it's not a subsidy if you're allowed to keep more money that you earn. Like if they lowered my taxes, would he claim that to be a subsidy to me? And so I think that's his approach to how corporations and businesses are treated are a bit strange. But I agree, the economy is not doing great. Unemployment is not as low as it appears to be, because the federal government only measures you as unemployed if you are currently looking for work and or drawing on unemployment. So long-term people that have been unemployed and people no longer looking for work are not counted as unemployed. And so Bernie Sanders is kind of correct in this. And also I think he's made the observation that part-time work is also a big issue. There's a lot of people working part-time who want full-time work, but as far as I understand it, part-time workers are counted as full-time, which is a problem as well. Okay, so he's got some endorsements here. Ooh, okay, juicy one. It is absolutely barbaric that medical debt even exists in the richest country on earth. We're going to eliminate all of it. So this is one of his tweets, or one of his main policy stances, and that's Medicare for all, where the government just pays for everyone's medical expenses. Now, we could debate the morality of medical debt being barbaric or immoral. I don't know why you would cast medical debt as different from any other sort of debt. It seems like an arbitrary distinction, because I don't think anyone is owed anything. And the medical debt problem, and in fact the cost of medical care and coverage and insurance is too high, is because of government intervention and the rules and the cost fixing and all the terrible things that the government does to the industry. I think overall you could see that with more government intervention over time, the cost has increased more quickly or continued to. During the debate over Obamacare, there was debate over how much the cost of healthcare would increase or decrease. The Democrats saying that medical care or the cost of medical care would decrease over time, but that turned out to be wrong, and it's increased across the board. Obviously, the people that are getting covered by government programs are not feeling that cost, but everyone else in the private sector, their increases in their insurance and their costs went up. And so I would say that's pretty barbaric, but he would never admit to something like that. But so that's maybe the foundation of the moral argument. The practical argument, perhaps the utilitarian argument, is that of cost. And if you want to get let's say a brief overview of the federal budget and how it looks for the long term, you can take a look at my video titled "The Most Important Issue in the 2020 Presidential Election." And that talks about the national budget and the national debt and how the programs we have now are unsustainable and they're going to explode in cost. And so those aren't even sustainable. And so a lot of these programs that Bernie Sanders wants are not tenable, and they will just accelerate the cost of healthcare eclipsing the federal budget. Okay, enough on that one. Let's scroll down. Oh, here's another one of his plans to nationalize various industries. So like the last one where I was just talking about was nationalizing healthcare. Now it appears he wants to nationalize housing. And it's interesting, he couches this tweet in the California issue with housing. So actually, let me read this first. In California and across the country, all our people deserve a safe and decent place to live. We need a homes guarantee and a national rent control standard. So obviously that will cost a lot of money as well. That'd be kind of difficult just in my mind trying to imagine how that would work. It sounds like a Herculean effort. It's very complicated, because obviously the economic environment in various places are different. Costs are different. Various issues affect the amount of housing that is available. And so the homes guarantee I can't see it as anything else as like a bribe. This is, hey, if you vote for me, I will give you a house. I will give you a home, which will be very appealing to the emotional side of us. Like, I think any reasonable person wants their fellow human beings and their fellow countrymen to be taken care of and well situated. I just have to say that route is impossible and wrought with injustice as far as stealing from some people to give to others when there's surely plenty of voluntary means to increase the living standard of everybody in the U.S. Rent control is an interesting one. I think it's pretty well documented and agreed amongst economists, whether they're mainstream economists or they're Austrians or in the Chicago school, or, I think Keynesians even agree. I think Paul Krugman would even agree. The rent control is a problem. And the issue stems from not being able to peg the cost of housing correctly. And rent control is a big problem in California. It's a big problem in New York. In these dense urban areas that practice rent control, it oftentimes, every time, makes the cost of housing just skyrocket. Getting back to the prices thing, if you price housing too low, well then there's going to be a shortage, because if something's cheaper, then the demand for it will increase. And especially in a place like a city where there's high demand to live there because it's more convenient, your job is there, there's more things to do. There's a lot of things that make it more desirable to be there. And so if you make the price too low, there will be a shortage of housing because there will be more people trying to get into these units, these houses or rentals or whatever. But then if the price is too high, then that's just going to prevent people from, getting housing, from being able to afford it. Another issue with pricing housing too low, which is I think the normal thing that happens, because obviously why would you want to do price controls and place the price too high? The issue mostly manifests itself as too low, the prices being too low, set by government regulators. So we got the shortage, right? There's a lot of people wanting to take advantage of the low cost of living or low cost of housing because of rent control. So there's a lot of people wanting to flood the market, and everything's bought up. Well, if prices are low, then that decreases the incentive for contractors and businesses and anyone else to build more housing, because they won't make money on it. And that's one of the big things that I think Sanders demonizes in his own mind is profit. A profit is not like inherently bad. Sure, it can be if someone or some business chases it at the expense of, let's say, morality, or at the expense of good business practices and treating people well. That's a bad thing. But without profits, you also don't get businesses. You don't attract more of the goods and services that you want. Profit is a big, big deal. It's one of the signals that go out to entrepreneurs and tell them, hey, there's a need, there's human need here that needs to be satisfied. And if you provide it at a reasonable cost, at a reasonable quality, you will profit from it. The flip side of profits is that the buyers also profit in a way, because now they've given away their money and they've received something that they value more than the money. So it's a win-win situation. And pulling the voluntary exchange and the mutual beneficial exchange from the equation, well, then you just have a lot of political posturing. You open up the door to people and interest groups lobbying the government to set the price of housing. And so there's a lot of problems with this. And in the real world, it has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that rent controls are bad. They often end up with really expensive housing and shortages. All right, let's move on here. Let's see. Corporate CEOs aren't big fans of our campaign. That's okay. Our campaign is powered by 7 million donations from 1.5 million donors. Okay, yeah. He really hates billionaires. I mean, I do too. If your wealth is gained through, let's say, immoral favoritism and bailouts from government, then absolutely your wealth is ill-gotten. And there's a lot of that going around nowadays. But I think the answer is to stop the preferential treatment in the bailouts and not to just tax them indiscriminately. All right, he cares about people. Cool. Let's see, I'm old-fashioned. I believe in democracy. One person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Special interest groups and the rich, they control the government, and they write a lot of legislation. I just think that they do that because there's power up for sale. Congress has way too much power. The president has way too much power. And where there's centralization of power, obviously there's going to be a lot of people who try to wield it. And in the form of special interest groups and corporations, well, they'll try to buy it. And people are imperfect, so politicians will be swayed by it. And I don't think fighting people's inclination to be sold out and to cater to those with money and influence is to give them more power. I think they've kind of proven that Congress and government as a whole has too much power, and it's not able to wield it, and it's failed at it. And so I think instead of rewarding the government with more power and influence is the wrong answer. If someone in your life has proven that they are unable to take care of your dog, then you won't let them do it. You will remove that responsibility from them, or that possibility. I will admit the impossibility or the low likelihood of reducing government power. That is absolutely true, but I don't think just handing more power and authority to the government is the answer either, even though that's probably going to happen whether I like it or not. Okay, here's one. I am proud to have the support of working people who understand that true freedom requires a living wage, security in retirement, comprehensive health care. Creativity can flourish when people are paid for their hard work and free from the fear of crushing debt. So I see some contradictory here, some contradictory ideas, right? So he thinks that working people should be provided a living wage, Social Security, health care, kind of a cradle to grave sort of arrangement where they're supported by the government. But then he comes at the end of this tweet saying people should be paid for their hard work and free from debt. Well, you're not advocating for paying people for their work. You're advocating for just providing things to people for their mere existence. And as far as debt goes, most people, by and large, statistically speaking, most people are in debt because of their spending habits. And now there's controlling factors, right? There is a portion of people out there who have, unfortunately, had hard times with their health for no action of their own causing it. And there's true cases where people are on hard times or in debt outside of their own doing. But most people are in debt because they chose to. Now, this is whether it's in education, which the cost is greatly inflated by government backing. I think it's 100% of student loans. He's really popular with students because of the free college and the student debt forgiveness. For one, these students chose to go to college. And two, the cost of college is huge because of government. Imagine you run a sandwich shop, and people come in and they pay for the sandwiches and they leave. Well, somebody in the local government says, you know what? People don't have enough sandwiches, and I think people should have access to sandwiches if they want one. So, they can come to me and take a loan out so that they can afford more sandwiches. And so people start taking loans out, and they come to the sandwich store and they're buying sandwiches and stuff. Well, the owner isn't just a non-actor, right? They react to their environment. And so they see all these people getting loans backed by the government to buy more sandwiches. I know this is ridiculous. But so these people have more money now. Well, what can you do when there's a high demand for your product and people are now, let's use the word perhaps incorrectly, more wealthy, or they have more cash? You increase your prices. You bump up the price, you're still selling about the same number of sandwiches, but you're getting way more money. On the other side, that same politician or that same group in government's like, oh man, sandwiches are getting more expensive. We're going to have to increase the amount of money we lend out for sandwiches. And then so that happens, and people continue to buy their sandwiches, and the sandwich shop owner's like, oh man, yeah, these people have more money. It's time to jack up the prices. And I'm going to put, with all this money, I'm going to put fancy water fountains in my restaurant, and I'm going to have gold-plated toilets, and, I'm swimming in money. This is great. And so it's this escalation of cost and this perverse incentive provided for by the government. You used to be able to go to college and pay for it with like a full-time job over the summer. That's what I've heard. I haven't checked the numbers. I am making assertions from what I've heard, just like Bernie Sanders is making assertions here. So I think I'm in good company here. But we all know that the boomers had a pretty good go of it. They had a lot of economic activity. There's stories of people paying for a house and raising a whole family on one income. And that's not the case anymore. And so education has been greatly inflated as far as the cost goes. And that's the same for healthcare. There's similar things have happened there. There are price controls and regulations and standards and stuff in the healthcare industry, but the prices still skyrocket. And that's obviously due to interference and money pumping from the federal government. Now, what's the answer? Well, if you look at history and you just take snapshots of what's going on, well, maybe we just roll back the stuff the government's done and stop inflating the costs. I don't see why health insurance and healthcare is any different from manufacturing TVs. Over time, TVs are getting bigger and better and cheaper. I was walking around in Walmart and there's like a 70-inch TV for like $300. And that's insane. Just like 10 years ago, a TV that size would be thousands of dollars. And this is an example of an industry that hasn't been heavily regulated and subsidized. And TVs are cheap and they're as good as they've ever been. And so I think as far as principles go in economics, I don't see why healthcare is any different. Just because it's important and just because it affects your physical body, I don't think that makes it a special category where it can't be handled by consumers and medical professionals and entrepreneurs providing cheap healthcare. I don't see why that can't happen. And I believe history proves my point. As far as like the NHS and the healthcare system in Canada, they're in huge debt. They're especially the NHS, they're doing terrible. There's the health level of the average British person is lower than it was 20 years ago. I saw an article about that. I'll try to find it. And there's a huge burden on the system. It's bleeding money. They've, like a year ago, I saw an article saying that they're going to stop providing surgeries to people who smoke or people that are too obese. It's a ticking time bomb, and it's a system that feeds itself, and it's fueled by altruism. So money is no longer an option. You just pump more money into it until you completely break the system. I think we've gone on long enough. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. One more time, if you have any comments or something you'd like to add to the conversation, to the exchange of ideas that I'm trying to get going here, comment below, include the hashtag read my comment. I think that's what I said at the beginning. And I'll try to pick out stuff that I think will make for a good exchange of ideas. Thanks for listening.